out this evening. I certainly appreciate you taking time out of your daily lives to come learn more about this issue of sex trafficking. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping first. For those of you who have not found them yet, the restrooms are on either side of the sanctuary in the hallway. They are unisex, so you can go either direction and find your restroom, and feel free to get up and down as necessary. Tonight, we have the pleasure of having former Mayor Mike Moncrief in the sanctuary with us. Mike, where are you? Oh, right here in the front, and his lovely wife, Rosie. Rosie is a strong advocate for stopping sex trafficking, and we're just thrilled to have them with us this evening. I'd like to ask our speakers if they'd go ahead and come down to the table if they would. We'll have Lindsay Dula from Alliance for Children speaking this evening, as well as behind her, Officer Hannah Rivard with the Fort Worth Police Department and John Cochin with Homeland Security. I'm Gigi. I'll tell you more about me in a moment. If everyone would take a moment to bow their head in prayer, I'd like Pastor Terry to lead us in prayer.
I want to welcome you to Western Hills Methodist Church, and we are privileged. This is the privilege that we can host this event, such an important event. Let us pray. Dear Lord, as we go tonight to find information about this subject, we just thank you for the panel and Gigi and all the people that are involved in this, Not in My Neighborhood. We ask you to bless our time together as we share and as we question this trafficking. Be with each person here and their families. And in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Got it? Thank you. As I said, my name's Gigi, or that's what you can call me. I got started with the Not in My Neighborhood effort after I met some wonderful individuals. They're all here tonight. I don't know if they'll stand up and be recognized. But we have Sharon and Jessica and Kathy. You'll see them helping out this evening. They started this effort, have had 3 of these awareness meetings now in different parts of Tarrant County. Are tremendous in terms of their work and their dedication to getting the word out to help prevent this. So just want to tell them thank you. As I said, my name's Gigi. That's at least what you can call me. Chester, did you cue up the slides for me? As he's bringing those up, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm a mother of a teenage victim of sex trafficking. I'm a divorced mother. I have 2 girls. They're 10 years apart. One's 19 now, the other one is 28. I live right here in Fort Worth, in fact, not far from this church. I own a modest home. I have a car, a truck. I have a dog and a cat for pets. I've always had great, rewarding jobs. In fact, I worked as a healthcare executive for many years here in Fort Worth. Several years ago, I changed employers so I could work at home, so I'd have more control over my schedule and be there for my youngest during her high school years. I've been divorced for almost 10 years, and I didn't date until just a few months ago. I actually finally started to date just a few months ago. My social life basically has been minimal. Don't get me wrong, I've got numerous friends, but my children are my passion. I'd much rather go see a movie or invite their friends over to the house or swim in the pool rather than go out and party. I have a story I want to share with you tonight. It's going to sound like a Lifetime TV movie, that's what everyone tells me, but believe me, it's very, very real. Chester, if you could move the slide, that'd be great. In 2015, my family was just me and my 2 girls. My oldest had gotten married and had her own place a few miles away. My youngest, who was 16 at the time, was busy just being a teenager. She was attending school, at least most of the time, and hanging with her friends. Most days, I was the one standing between her and what she really wanted to do. I'm sure a lot of parents can understand that feeling. And as with most young teenage girls, my daughter, tall, thin, stunningly beautiful girl, she was struggling with her identity. She was certain she was overweight. She was certain that her boyfriend must be cheating on her, and certain that most other girls were just out to get her. She's not shy. She's extremely social and talkative and very outspoken. I found that her teachers and her school administrators either loved her or thought she was a troublemaker. Next slide, please, Chester. One more. Thank you. By fall, after school had started, things took a drastic turn in our household. School had begun again, and my daughter and I were becoming increasingly at odds. During the summer, I had secured the help of a psychiatrist, 2 therapists, and I had her randomly drug tested. But she still was continuing with her defiant behavior. She was stealing money from me when she could. She didn't agree to curfew. She would sneak out of her bedroom window at night sometimes. I even put a lock on her window. After several disagreements, we decided that she would go stay with a family friend for a few weeks. Frankly, I needed a break. Before she moved to our friend's home, my daughter and I agreed on 2 things. She would keep her cell phone on at all times. I paid for it. And that she would answer all my calls and return all my texts within a reasonable time frame. Things seemed to work out for a bit. Then one night, just a few weeks in, the GPS locator on my daughter's cell phone pinpointed her somewhere I didn't recognize. I didn't think too much about it, but again the next evening, the same location showed up. Next slide, please, Chester. I pulled up the location on Google Maps. Oh, back one, please. If you would. One more. Keep going. You're a little ahead of me, Chester. Keep going. Right there. I pulled up the location on Google Maps. It looked like a hotel. So I called and I asked her about it. She said her friends had pulled their money together to have a girls' party to celebrate her birthday. Her birthday was just a few days later, and so that's what she told me. They were going to have a celebration over the weekend. They were just going to watch movies and stuff, and that's what they did. A couple days later, my oldest daughter and I took her to lunch. Chester, can you move it back, please? Thank you. A couple days later, my oldest daughter and I took her and her friends to lunch, and I tried to break her story. I asked them every question I could think of, and I just couldn't seem to get anyone not to support that story. Within just a few days, things began to escalate. My daughter became evasive when I talked to her. She would text instead of returning my phone calls, or she'd say her battery was dying and she couldn't stay on the phone very long. I called the mother of the friend she was staying with, and she told me that her daughter had mentioned something about going there. She told me as long as her kids stayed out of trouble, were going to school, and had a job, she wasn't going to monitor them all day. Next slide. Yeah, that's perfect right there. As her mom, I reviewed the detailed logs for her cell phone to see who she was talking to. There was a number that appeared on the log that I didn't recognize. It was listed over 50 times in just less than a week. But the calls never lasted more than a few minutes, outgoing or incoming. Next slide, please. I pasted the number in the Facebook search engine, and there were no matches. I pasted the number into google.com, and it brought up the usual sites that you see. Whitepages.com, callername.com, Yellow Pages, etc. Then further down the page, there it was, a site called evilempire.com. At the time, I thought maybe it was a video game thing, but I clicked the link. The web page that came up was primarily black, but had the typical search cube with the magnifying lens. I pasted that same phone number into the search engine, and immediately a picture appeared on my screen. A young white girl with a thong, bent over a bed, the picture taken from behind, so all you could see was her back. An arrow pointing to the right of the screen, saying, "Click here for more photos." I clicked, and I cried. There she was, my little girl, in a thong and a nightie, lying on a hotel bed. Pictures out there for eternity. At first I cried, and then I got mad, and then I got scared. What should I do? Did my daughter know these were out there? If I called the police, would they arrest her? What would you do? Next slide, please. I spent the next 5 hours trying to find anybody anybody who could tell me what to do next. I didn't want to call friends. I was too embarrassed. Phone call after phone call retelling the horrifying fact that my daughter, my sweet 16 and barely turned 17-year-old daughter, was being solicited for sex on the internet. Some people transferred me, some gave me other numbers. Some told me to file a police report, and one, at an agency in Austin for children, simply told me she was sorry and hung up on me. The police department finally decided to send the police officer to my home, so I waited for over an hour for the car to come to talk to me. I was angry, embarrassed, hurt, but more than anything, I was afraid. The police came to my home, connected me with the one lone detective at that time assigned to trafficking cases in Tarrant County. I was told to do nothing directly. He told me to watch, to wait, and try to get my daughter to come home on her own. Although every ounce of my body wanted to run to that hotel and drag her out of there because I knew what hotel she was at. He convinced me that that would have only one of three outcomes: death for me or my daughter, injury for me or my daughter, or worst, my daughter would disappear. They would sell her to another pimp in another town and most likely be gone forever. Next slide. The next 3 weeks were miserable. As the police did their part to monitor the situation, I pressured my daughter to come home. I was asked not to let her know I knew anything, not about the pictures, not about the hotel, not about the police. The experts said the best case scenario was for her to leave on her own or wait until they successfully set up a sting operation to get her out safely. Miraculously, within a few weeks, my daughter ran. She heard the pimps talking about moving her to another city because her mother kept calling her on her cell phone. My daughter found a window of time when she was alone, and she ran barefoot to an IHOP where a friend picked her up. Next slide. The story, if you got a chance to look at it on the introductory slides, is the story that I gleaned from my daughter of the day that she ran, just FYI. So what happened to those people that seduced my daughter? Oh, sorry, wrong page. I got ahead of you this time. Okay, this page didn't print, so I'm just going to have to wing it. Oh, there it is. Sorry. When she came home, I was asked not to acknowledge that I knew anything. The experts told me it was better to wait until she was ready to talk. During her first conversation with the Fort Worth detective and the agent from Homeland Security, which, by the way, is sitting right here at this table tonight, she told them about the man that raped her, the man that pushed her out of her moving car and burned her with cigarettes and threatened her family. She wouldn't talk about any of the others. She said they were nice to her and that they had protected her from the bad guys. All part of that manipulative mind game that they play with these young girls that you'll hear about this evening. Next slide. Oh, that one. Yes, that's fine. Can you back up one, please? Yeah, the next one's fine, thank you. Mine are out of order. Since this happened, my daughter has spent almost 6 months in mental and drug abuse facilities. She's testified in front of a grand jury. She's had to sit across a courtroom from the family of the man who recruited and abused her. She was not able to return to finish high school in the traditional way. She struggles with being in the same neighborhood as rumors run rampant about what happened to her and why she disappeared from school. What can and should she say to her friends? She was pretty mad at me for a long time. Next slide. So what happened to those people that seduced my daughter into trafficking? Those people that promised her money, lots of money. Those people who quickly turned on her from offering promises to physical abuse, use, and threats. Let me assure you that Homeland Security takes trafficking very seriously and has a local office with individuals dedicated to finding and rescuing victims and persecuting those responsible. And I highlighted on this page something you'll hear again later. A minor cannot consent to sex. Therefore, they're never a prostitute. They're always a victim. Next slide. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. All of the original 9 arrested are now serving time in federal prison. 2, I think, are on probation. John can tell you more. 2 received 30 years in federal prison for this crime. They could have been sentenced to life. The case continues as the police and Homeland Security move on to the next level of criminal activity associated with this case. I attended the sentencing of one of the predators and personally asked the judge to set an example and to let these criminals know we're not going to put up with this in our county, in our city, or in our neighborhood here. My daughter just turned 19 a few weeks ago. She's living at home, but she's anxious to get a real place. She's got her driver's license now. She's finished her high school courses online and got her diploma in just the last few weeks. In many ways, she is wise beyond her years, but in others, she's still just a child. She talks about what happened to her in third person. Says she wants to put it behind her and that it's like it happened to somebody else. The experts say the emotional scars will always be there, and at some point the emotions will catch up with her. I have my own scars related to all this, but I'm working on them. Sharing my story with you is one of those steps in my healing. I want to thank you for listening and taking the time to learn more this evening.
Hello. Thank you, Gigi, for sharing that. Anybody have any questions for her? I know it's a lot. It's heavy when you hear a story like that, right? We're going to Q&A later. So. Just give them a minute. That's okay. We can absorb that. My name is Lindsay Dooley. I work with Alliance for Children. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what Alliance for Children is and a little bit about this topic, because what we do kind of goes hand in hand with what she talked about. I'm a walker. I really wouldn't have a microphone. I just yell a lot, but I want to make sure that you guys hear and nobody's straining. I'm hoping that maybe movement will also help keep everybody awake, because I really, really appreciate y'all coming here after work at the end of your day, which I know means usually you're tired and maybe you're hungry, but this is a really, really important topic. And we are very passionate about making sure people understand that knowledge is something that is going to be able to combat this. That's important. So let me tell you a little bit about Alliance for Children. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to use you as a clicker tester, because you're my friend. So we're going to try to work this out, right?
Right.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so Alliance for Children is the Children's Advocacy Center of Tarrant County, so if you want to go and progress. And what I want to make sure that you understand is that we have a team of professionals that are chosen by our community to be able to work on this. And I want you to know that because I want you to have confidence that if and when cases pertaining to child abuse and child sex trafficking, domestic minor sex trafficking, child sexual exploitation, you hear it by a lot of different names, that's included into what these teams do. What we do is we have a proactive and coordinated approach with a lot of different individuals and a lot of different agencies. That includes law enforcement, it includes child protective services, it includes a specialized medical team that do specialized exams with these kids. It includes the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office, sometimes the Federal Attorney's Office. We all come together when it comes to the investigation of these cases, and then also to bring healing, because that is what is crucial. It's to bring support and healing for the protected caregivers as well as these kids. So I want you guys to have confidence that in Tarrant County, there is a team that exists. Alliance for Children has been in business, so to speak, since 1992. We're those folks for you, and I want you to know that it exists and it's here for you. And so in Tarrant County, we actually have several different locations, and with that teamed approach, we have co-locations. So in 2 of our investigative locations, we have law enforcement, child protective services, housed with Alliance for Children staff, all working together. In our mid-cities and our newest location, our newest investigative location in the northwest area, kind of the Lakeside, Lake Worth area, we don't have some agencies housed with us because there's so many agencies. Our law enforcement agencies in the mid-cities area, they're working a lot of different cases, so that they just come over and we make a space for them and we all work as a team. But we're in these communities because we want to make sure that distance is not a barrier for healing services. It's very, very important. That's one of the core missions for Alliance for Children, is to be in those communities. So how does that relate to domestic minor sex trafficking, child sex trafficking, again, child sexual exploitation? You hear this by a lot of different names. This is a topic that has come up several times in my career. I've been in this career for about 17 years or so, because child abuse does not go away. You see things that kind of go in cycles. What I'm very excited about this cycle is that it has a lot more grit to it than it ever has before. A times when people think trafficking, it ends up honestly being a little glamorized. And sometimes that's because of the media, that's because of movies like Taken, things to that extent. And sometimes it can happen like that, but that's not most commonly what we're seeing. And I think that's part of what's important for us, to have a realistic expectation about what these cases are, what they look like, and most importantly, what we can do to actually prevent it from ever happening. That's what's crucial to be able to stop this. The other part is that if we do see any signs or anything that just a red flag, those warning bells that go off and say, I think something's going on with this kid, we have to be able to know how to respond appropriately. And that's what I want to be able to talk with you guys tonight. So, when we're talking about these cases, we again have to know that we've got experts in the field that are going to be able to provide protective and healing services for them. Again, like Alliance for Children does, like when we're working with our team of experts that you guys are going to hear from Hannah and John as well. And we have to know that there's a lot of characteristics that are kind of origin characteristics for a lot of these cases. We know in over 70% of the cases when it pertains to child sex trafficking, they have a prior history of abuse or neglect in their home. So an origin issue is child abuse itself. What we know is that child abuse is exceedingly damaging for kids. It is traumatic. It is things that are going on in their homes, because most often when kids are abused, particularly when they're sexually abused, they're abused by somebody they know and trust, somebody that they have a relationship with. Over 90% of the time when kids are sexually abused, it's by somebody that they already have a relationship with. In Tarrant County specifically, 95% of the time, they know their abuser. So when we're talking about kids who now are trying to heal past the trauma of sexual abuse, there's a lot of things that are skewed. Relationships, self-esteem, sometimes what is considered attention-seeking behavior. When I say that, I'm talking about kids who just want to be loved and they don't know what healthy love is. And so unfortunately what sometimes happens is they start engaging in high-risk behavior. And that's when we can start seeing kids go down a very dangerous path. And that high-risk path is something that we want to be able to combat, because I think if we can combat that, we can decrease the number of children that are ever trafficked in the first place. When we're talking about these kids unfortunately sometimes stand out. And these perpetrators, these pimps, will pick these kids out from a crowd. And it's remarkable. They literally can go into a mall and they can say, you, not you, you, not you, you, not you. It's remarkable. I don't want to give props to these folks, but we have to recognize they're smart. This is a business for them, and they know how to pick their commodity, and that's what these kids are. So they're looking for kids that maybe have some behavioral issues. Maybe they have substance abuse issues. Maybe they have those, again, self-esteem issues. They're also just kids. So the idea of what these perpetrators do when they approach and start really talking to these kids in that engagement phase, it's all about doing what we know a lot of kids want to do. What do they want to do? They want to be treated like adults. Your mom doesn't understand you. Your dad doesn't understand you. I know, they won't let you go stay the night at your friend's house, and they have a dumb curfew, and nobody agrees with that. You know what? Just come hang out. You can just come hang out with me. You know, when we're hanging out, I'm drinking a beer. I think that you're mature enough to be able to handle a beer. Here, have a beer. And it's little stuff like that. Again, there's occasions in my career I can actively think of one case that we call, that I consider really more so of a guerrilla pimping case. When I say that, I'm talking about guerrilla as in a very violent. It was a very violent act. They really snatched this kid, they beat the crap out of her, pardon the expression, and then they immediately put her on the internet and started selling her. Very, very rare. Exceedingly rare. For all the kids that I've talked to, I've talked to a lot of victims in general when I'm talking about child sex trafficking. That's a small percentage, because we are really trying to scratch the surface and trying to identify these kids. But with the kids that I have talked to that have been trafficked, they've been hanging out with their friends. They literally go to the corner store, they're going to get some chips or something, and somebody just starts talking to them. Hey, do you want to make some money? Well, okay. Or hey, do you want to party? We're partying over in the hotel too, just 2 doors down from you guys. And it ends up being sometimes a very casual approach. That's what it feels like. Because again, it's emboldening those kids to feel like they're now making adult decisions. Which is, again, what so many teenagers want. That's always the conflict with the adults and the kids, right? They're grown, they know better. They think they do. And unfortunately what happens is they then start going down this winding and very dangerous path, and they can't get out. So often they can't get out. So what we want to be aware of is we want to be aware of what this paradigm shift is going to look like for our community. Is that it's not, for me in my experience, it is not this scary thing. I don't want you guys to go to the local mall and think every teenager you see is a trafficking victim. I don't want you to think that. What I want you guys to have is some signs that you can look for that may tell you something different. I want you to be aware of kids in your own life, that if there are some issues that are coming about and you think this is the path that they're going down, that you can tap into resources in the community and we can stop that. Okay? So when we're talking about the recruitment, again, we talked about aspects from both the victim perspective and the perpetrator's perspective. Because these are perpetrators of abuse. That's who these pimps are. They are abusers. And I'm going to use that very specific language because I believe that's what they are. I don't think we need to cushion that. But for our victim, again, sometimes they want attention. It's unhealthy attention. They don't know that. But it's somebody who's telling them sometimes stuff that they may never have heard before. Or they're just hearing it from somebody else. These are kids sometimes with really, really low self-esteem. Any teenager ever go through that? Right? Yeah. Sounds pretty normal, huh? So when you go through your life and you don't hear nice things at home, because that's what some of our kids are experiencing, but then you get this one person who seems to really understand you. And they understand that home isn't happy. And they understand that you are wise beyond your years. And there's so many things that you have in common. Then these kids fall in love. And that's what they do. That's what the perpetrators do. They make these kids fall in love and think that this is a right, healthy, appropriate relationship. And that's when it turns and it instead becomes a business, because that's always what it is for the perpetrator. It's always a business. It's always a way for them to get money or something else, exchange for drugs, things to that extent. So again, with our kids, sometimes it's attention seeking, sometimes it's wanting to be an adult, sometimes it is, it ends up being what they think is true love, and that's what's really, really sad. But that's what it is for them. And it's a real thing. And that's the hard part, I think, a lot of times for families, because sometimes your kids may get into these relationships, and you know it. This person doesn't love you, but you can't tell them that with them actually hearing it. For the recruiter, they know it's all about that attention. I'm going to put attention on this kid. I'm going to put positive, what they deem to be positive attention to this kid. I'm going to buy them things. I'm going to shower them with gifts. I'm going to give them special attention. I'm going to give them all the freedom in the world. What do you want? You want to go to the store? Let's go to the store. You want to get your nails done? Let's go get your nails done. You go to bed whenever you want to. You want to use drugs? Fine. You want to use alcohol? Fine. And so they then start building that relationship, and it intertwines. It sometimes can look like it's a sexual relationship, as in a boyfriend-girlfriend type relationship, but then there's also aspects that it turns into being kind of a parental relationship, because then control starts. When these perpetrators get these kids to start working, it's under their rules and their laws. It's their money. They buy everything. They say when you're working or not. They make the dates. They answer the phone. So then it also becomes this very controlled situation. And again, we've got children who are in this really controlled situation and they don't know what else to do about it. So when we're talking about this, I think one of the hardest parts is to understand how does one person have this much control? These aren't good people. You would think that they're going to be some amazing rock star folks when they walk through the door, and they're not. But what they are is they're the right amount of charming for that kid at that time. That's where we have to have conversations with our children about how to stay safe from this. Because again, a lot of times you think that this is all coming in a face-to-face scenario. So often what we also see is that it is starting online. Online and internet safety is a real thing. If you guys have not started talking to your kids or the kids in your lives that you love about internet safety, start talking yesterday, because you're behind the 8 ball. I will tell you this very, very transparently. I don't get social media. I don't get it. I just don't. Like, hey, you want to meet for lunch? Awesome, see you there. Like, that's about as far as I can. I'll text that. I can't get anything beyond that. Kids today, and probably a lot of people in this room, are online constantly. This is what a relationship is now. And it's a very safe place to voice concerns or frustrations, or school stinks, I hate this, I don't want to be in school, or my parents don't care, they don't understand me, they don't, whatever that kid is complaining about in the day, and that's where our perpetrators are finding their kids. And it happens so quickly and so fast that it's hard for us to stop. But what we can do to get in front of that is that internet safety portion of it. We have to have conversations about online safety. I cannot reiterate that enough. That's going to be core. So, when we're talking about, why they stay. This is, I think, one of those aspects that's really hard for people to understand. Why can't they leave? Maybe the person wasn't there all the time. They weren't staying at the same hotel room. Or maybe the person was even briefly arrested and these kids were still, quote unquote, working. They're on automatic. It's their job to make money, even if that pimp and that abuser is not there. And so that's really hard for people to understand. Why do these kids stay? But again, understand what's happening with these kids. Sometimes they're coming from home environments that are so bad that these kids honestly and genuinely have told me, this was better than what I was living in. Sometimes we get kids who, again, they don't sometimes even realize it. They were there, they were at a party, they started talking to somebody, they started hanging out with this guy, they ended up kind of staying with him for a couple days, and then suddenly, before they know it, they're being prostituted. And with that, when they do finally get out of it, they almost didn't realize what happened. So what we have to understand is that now these kids who have sometimes come from normal, happy, healthy homes, sometimes abuse has not occurred in their home. But now with all the things that they've had to do, all the stuff that they've lived through and they've seen, how do they think they can go back home and start going to 8th grade again? That's the other part. It's hard to imagine that. It's hard to imagine what these kids have to do every day. But that's one of the reasons that they don't know, how do I go back and look my mom in the eye, knowing what I had to do? And that is a really big barrier for them, sometimes in seeking help. So, sorry, I'm not going to get long with you guys. I'm going to cut it short. So, there we go. When we're talking about these kids, this is what I'm going to try to leave you with so I don't eat up anybody else's time. These kids have a hard time talking about what's happened to them. Because what happens to some of these kids in such a short amount of time is inconceivable to a lot of people in this room. I can't tell you how many kids that I talk to, and I can talk to them literally for about 2 hours straight about a 24-hour time period and all they've experienced. Anywhere from sex to other robberies, other crimes that they've been forced to commit, to drug use. It's a myriad of things, and sometimes very, very quickly. But these kids really don't want to talk about it. That's one of the hardest things. When I say we're scratching the tip of the iceberg, we are. I'll tell you that last year at Alliance for Children, we interviewed over 1,500 kids. Of those, about maybe 13 or so were trafficking kids. It doesn't mean that I don't think trafficking kids are out there, but they're really hard to identify. They don't self-identify. Now mind you, that's the same thing we say about any type of abuse. Kids that have been abused don't want to talk about it. It's sometimes one of the hardest, most embarrassing, most shameful, most guilt-ridden things, and they have the bravery at one point or another to finally start talking about it. So if you get a child who is going to talk about it, please just listen. Please just listen to them. You may see signs of this, but I don't want you guys to have this expectation that kids are going to walk in, and if it's a girl, she's going to be in a super skimpy dress with really, really high heels on and a face full of makeup. That's not as often what we see. They could be walking down the street in sweatshirts and sweatpants, and you would not know that they are prostituting whatsoever. You have no idea about that. So I don't want you getting in your head that it's that sexualized of an image. Sometimes it's other things. Sometimes it's tattoos or brands. Sometimes it's other things that they may have on them or may not have. They may not have identification on them. So if you're talking about an 18-year-old with no form of identification, that may be a little concerning for you. If you've got a kiddo who is really reticent to make eye contact, won't answer any questions, or the questions that they will answer, they're really evasive or it doesn't make sense. These are kids that sometimes have run away, and yet they managed to live for long, extended periods of time, yet they can't say how they did that. They won't say who they stayed with. They won't say how they made any money. It's things like that. These are the alarm bells that I want you to kind of have going off, that this just doesn't make sense. It's not clicking right. If these kids are talking, please don't ask them questions. Please, please, please don't ask them questions. I promise you there is somebody who's going to be questioning them appropriately in a safe place, and it's going to be captured so they don't have to keep telling their story time and time again. I can never reiterate this enough. Unless you are in a role of an investigator or a forensic interviewer, please don't question these children. Because all we do at that point is make them tell their story, some of the worst stuff that they've ever had to do, and we make them relive it. And we don't need to do that. Even if your job, if you're a school counselor, if you're a teacher, if you are a pastor, if your job is to hear people, then I just want you to listen. That's it. Don't ask questions. You don't need to get IDs of perpetrator. You don't need to do any part of that. Just listen and make the report. We don't want these kids to have to be re-victimized more than they are. Again, when I talked about Alliance for Children as an organization, I wanted you guys to know we have people specialized and highly trained to be able to communicate with children in a developmentally appropriate, safe, neutral, non-leading manner. Those are really key things. Because what then I get to do, I get to get up on the stand and I get to defend everything that I do. Because I know this will shock you, is that sometimes when defense attorneys are trying to defend those people that are accused, they say these kids are making it all up. They say that I put words in their mouth, and because of my training, I can defend that. But if you don't have that, we need you to be that source of support that that child originally identified. If they have picked you to make their outcry to, you are a safe person. Don't make them promises. Don't say, I'm going to make sure that person goes to jail, because as we talked about, they may still love that person. That's not what the answer is. They're just telling you something, just listen. Just say, you know, I'm sorry that happened. I'm really proud of you for talking about it. Thank you so much for telling me. Don't make other promises of, well, you're never going to have to go back there again. Because you don't know where back there is, whether it's back home or you don't have to go to, you won't have to go to protective custody or foster care. You can't make those promises. I can't make those promises. There's few people that can do that. So don't make those promises. The basic things that you can do is make sure that their needs, their immediate needs are taken care of. When was the last time they ate? 5-minute snack. Check their allergies. Don't give them something they shouldn't eat. But give them something basic. That sounds really small, but that means something. Give them those basic needs, but please, 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 please don't question them, and then make a report. We're going to have all of our contact information available for you guys. If there's something that, again, you're just like, I don't know, I just need to ask somebody about it, call us. That is what we are here for. So please, please, please let us know. I can talk for a lot longer, so we're going to skip so we can let them talk. But thank you. We're going to pass the mic.
My name is John Koshin. I'm a special agent with HSI here in Dallas, and most people do not even know who HSI is. Anybody in here? No? All right. It's Homeland Security Investigations. We're under ICE. Okay? ICE, prior to 9/11, you had U.S. Customs, and then you had U.S. Immigration. After 9/11, they combined it into one agency, and they called it ICE. they've started moving kind of away from that again, and they've split us into HSI, which is called Homeland Security Investigations, and then ERO handles the immigration side of the house. We are the primary federal law enforcement agency that deals with human trafficking, both domestic and international. And there are a lot, he's going to click through this. To be honest with you, it's just the first and the last slide, because I'm not even going to go like this. There are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to human trafficking. Most people believe that in order for it to be human trafficking, that's an international problem. They're bringing these girls from these countries and they're putting them in these shady places and selling them for sex. That is not what human trafficking is. That's part of it, but human trafficking can occur anywhere. It can be somebody selling just one person out of a house, out of a car, somebody just at a hotel. What human trafficking is it's selling somebody for either labor or for the purposes of commercial sex in order to obtain a benefit. Okay, that benefit can be money, can be drugs, can be a place to stay, can be a car that they're trading it for. I've seen all of these. We are all over the United States and all over the state of Texas specifically. My office is in Dallas, but we have offices in Austin and Houston, along the border down in Brownsville as well. As many as satellite offices within there. We work here in Dallas with all of the local law enforcement agencies. I specifically stay out here in Fort Worth, in this area, in Tarrant County. We work with Dallas. We have what's called the North Texas Trafficking Task Force, which is put together by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Here in Dallas, or in Fort Worth specifically, you heard Gigi's story earlier. That was my case that I started. And I want to say that when she first discovered what was happening to her daughter, the frustration that she expressed to you when she called and nobody knew what to do, that wasn't an uncommon occurrence at that time. What I will say now is things have come a long way in a very short period of time. You call the Fort Worth Police Department now, and you report that my child is a runaway and I think she's being trafficked. They're not going to transfer you to the traffic division of the Fort Worth Police Department. Okay? They're going to send you straight to our office. I work with Officer Rivard and a detective. He's Brian Johnson. You might get him. That case kind of made the news. It made national news. It was briefed to the president. And that kind of got the ball rolling in the way that we are addressing it now. It caught the governor's office's attention. The governor has started moving forward on a bunch of things, projects that we are participating with, as well as all of the law enforcement agencies in here, in the DA's office. So things are moving forward a lot quicker, and we are streamlining the process. That's the kind of the point that I want to get across. Overall, this is a very, very ugly topic, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, because nobody wants to talk about this. Nobody wants to talk about children being sold for sex. Nobody wants to talk about children being raped. Children having pictures of them taken in lingerie or no clothing at all and placed all over the internet. Children having to have sex with complete strangers who often abuse them while they're having sex for money. And then somebody coming in and taking that money. Nobody wants to talk about a pimp who has these kids and puts them in these situations. And when the kids do push back in any manner whatsoever, they're beaten, they're raped, they're held under control by threats. You know, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to call all your friends and tell them what you do. By being here tonight, people start talking more and more about it. It's like Lindsay said, I don't want you to think that every kid that you see walking on the street or walking alone in the mall is a trafficking victim. Just want you to know that it's happening. And if you see signs, don't be afraid to call the police and report it. That case that we dealt with, the primary one first, resulted in all those people that she had put up there going to prison for 30 years and 25. And those sentences might not seem like a lot to you. The range of penalties for child sex trafficking is 15 years to life in prison. Trafficking through force, fraud, and coercion is 10 years to life in prison. Every single one of those people in that first case came in and, for lack of a better term, sang like a canary. Okay? They turned in all kinds of pimps who were engaging in the same thing. From that case, I later indicted another one with 7 more targets. They're all pled guilty. They're going to be sentenced starting in January. From that one, there were 5 more that were indicted. And then just recently, we indicted the one that was in the news last week with 10 more. It just keeps going and going. That is how we are hoping this continues. We want the conversation out there. When you're at the hotel and you see the kids that, I'm sorry, 14-year-old kids should not be alone in the hotel room. Right? Men coming and going. Or women coming and going. When you see that kind of stuff, call it and you report it, and that's how we get going. But you can push it to the last slide. So I'm going to save more time for questions. All right, back it up one, I'm sorry. That's the federal line right there, 866-347-2423. That's national. You can also call through the Blue campaign, it's hidden in plain sight, DHS 2X, same number. If you want to reach me, I'm at the Fort Worth Police Department. All you got to do is ask for the major case unit in the human trafficking section, and they'll get you through to us. We're out of the office a lot, but if you leave a message, I can promise you someone will call you back, and it'll probably be her. It's just much nicer than I am anyway. My email address, if you want to push it forward one more, should be up there. Yeah, up at the top. That phone number there, you can disregard. That's from when I was in Oklahoma. So that was just more. And I'm going to turn it over to Officer Rivard, so she can tell you more about what's happening here.
Thank you, John. It's really an honor to be here with all these women and John, because they're such a huge part of what's going on here in Tarrant County, and I'm very blessed to be part of that. A lot of other places and a lot of other communities don't have this kind of support. They don't have these meetings. And Fort Worth is honestly leading America in a lot of this. There's a lot of departments I've talked to that don't have this, including Dallas. So we're doing amazing things here in Fort Worth. So my name is Hannah. I am with Fort Worth PD. You can go to the next slide. I've not been working in human trafficking as long as some of these people. I started about 5 years ago when I was in nonprofits prior to being a police officer. So I worked with something called the Defender Foundation, Mission to Care. I did a lot of work in strip clubs when I lived in Florida. And that picture of me, it looks like I'm 12 years old, is actually when I was in Brazil working with the Brazilian police in Fortaleza prior to the World Cup. So that was me with a little girl at a safe house who'd been abused and trafficked, and my passion just went from there. So I wanted to become a police officer. I joined Fort Worth PD and shoved my way out to the human trafficking unit. So, for lack of a better term, didn't really ask, just kind of made it there. That is my personal contact information. That is my personal cell phone, or my work cell phone, but it's going to come right to me. So you feel free to take a picture of that if you want to. Call me, text me. Send me an email, and I will answer your questions or get you to someone who can. Go to the next slide. And go to the next slide. Yeah, there you go. So, Fort Worth human trafficking, it's kind of come and gone in Fort Worth. So, the first major case here that kind of got us on the map for human trafficking was in 2002. There was a whole group of Honduran women and children who were being trafficked out of a brothel on North Side. So they were brought down to Central Division, sort of downtown, and were trafficked there back and forth from North to Central. So that kind of got us in the map for human trafficking. Our unit came and went, whether or not we had a grant. Sometimes we had a detective, sometimes it was an officer, sometimes there was no one. And so a lot of people didn't even know, even to this day, there's some officers that don't know we have a human trafficking unit. So we finally became permanent last year, and thanks in big part to a woman named Felicia Grantham, and also to the sergeant of our major case unit, who recognized the need for a trafficking unit to be permanent in Fort Worth. So that sounded all great and exciting, and the first permanent unit was 2 people. It was me and a detective. So thankfully we had John, I like to say he was worth 10 people, so we actually had 12 people in the unit, which is really good. So thankfully it has now continued to grow, so we now, as of next week, we will have 2 detectives and 2 officers, then a civilian, and upwards of 3 Homeland Security agents. So we're continuing to grow, which is really, really good, because as I'll show you later with the stats of the cases that we have, it's growing more than we can handle. We are also part of something called the 5 Stones Task Force, and that's what our civilian, Felicia Grantham, basically runs and operates, and Not in My Neighborhood is part of the task force. So that is a really good way to get involved later, if you want to get involved. They meet the last Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. Right now it's the Nashville Police Sector over on the east side of Fort Worth, but they're going to be probably soon moving, so don't just show up there because you might not know. Just revisiting the sector just for fun. So let us know and reach out to me or someone here, anyone who runs this meeting, and they'll be able to get you the information for that task force. So they're very, very helpful, just like Not in My Neighborhood helps us a lot also. And go to the next slide. So a little bit on trafficking. So Texas is number 3 in the nation for human trafficking. This is a heat map of actually massage parlors. I don't really have a good heat map of trafficking or hotline calls per se, but this kind of shows some of the hot spots for trafficking in the U.S. Florida, California, and New York are very high, and Texas is actually higher than it appears to be on this map, but extremely high. So if you go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit more about Texas. Why are we so high for human trafficking? And there's a lot of reasons. Everything from that we are on the border of Mexico, so there's a lot of smuggling that happens. Now, smuggling and refugees, smuggling is not human trafficking. Smuggling is when someone goes over a border and there's an agreement to go over the border illegally. Human trafficking, like John said earlier, is forced labor, forced sex for someone's gain. So they're totally different things. They do get mixed up, but people who are smuggled often are easily become victims of human trafficking. And so that's why we have a higher rate of trafficking here. We have a higher rate of refugees. And there's a few other factors, but too much to go into here. Fort Worth, in particular, has a very high amount of human trafficking. There's a lot of reasons for this also. Tarrant County is one of the highest in the state for child abuse cases, and that directly relates over to how much human trafficking we have. Fort Worth also sits on the state's corridor of crime. So we have I-35 going north and south, and we have I-20 and I-30 going east and west. These are very, obviously, highly traveled roads for truckers, for smuggling, for any number of people moving other people. So for a lot of them, they come through Fort Worth. Our traffickers take a lot of routes, but it will often go to Shreveport, we'll come back to Fort Worth, might go to Odessa, come back to Fort Worth, down to Austin, come back to Fort Worth. So they end up back here. The next slide. Here's some stats. They're probably hard to read for y'all, so just read them. There's approximately 80,000 minors and youth victims of sex trafficking in Texas, approximately 235,000 victims of labor trafficking, around 300,000 victims total of human trafficking in Texas, 600 million victims of dollars that are taken from victims of labor trafficking, and it costs the state almost $7 billion. So there's a lot of reasons that it costs us this much money. Even in Houston, for example, there was a study trying to figure out how much money illegal massage parlors made. Not to mention Backpage or anything online or any other sex trafficking or labor trafficking. And it was estimated that massage parlors alone in Houston made over $100 million a year. And so just think of how the revenue that would be from anything else, not just the massage parlors. And then you can kind of extrapolate that to Fort Worth and how much money is our sex trafficking business making in Fort Worth illegally. So it's just something to consider. For the next slide. Texas has good and bad. Going for it, mostly good as far as human trafficking goes. We were very early on in the fight for fighting human trafficking as far as legislation. We are one of 3 states that allows restitution back to victims in all categories. And we've made more arrests than any other state. The sad part of this, which, well, it's good for federal and bad for locals, is that less than 10% of human trafficking arrests have been made by the local or state departments. It's been primarily by the feds, which is fantastic for the federal system, but it just means that we as a local community and local police departments need to start stepping up, because this is something we can and should be fighting from a local level. So we have very harsh laws though, which is awesome. Like John said, that's a federal law, but we also in the state can sentence people, traffickers, to decades in prison if these issues. So next slide. So some estimates of trafficking. This is a stat from Homeland Security, that there's different percentages. So percentage of trafficked victims possibly. Obviously it's hard to know because it's a crime. If you knew how many people were being trafficked, you probably wouldn't have a trafficking problem because we could go get them. Just like if I asked you how many pounds of weed or marijuana are in Fort Worth today, we have absolutely no idea because it's a crime. If we knew, we wouldn't stop. So, these are some average estimates, maybe, possibly. So, 0.008% in the US, 0.02 in Dallas, and interestingly enough, 0.06 in Fort Worth. Why is that? More information we have the time to go in here. Child abuse, certain laws, vice units not being here, a lot of different things. But if we were to take that number, and go ahead and click, next slide, that would mean that there's over 500 people being trafficked at any given time in Fort Worth. If anything, I think that's probably low. I hesitate to say that, but there's a lot of victims here. I know that we could keep ourselves busy all day long and have probably every detective in Fort Worth working these cases and still have more to go. So again, stats are very difficult to pull because of various reasons, the way we get cases, the way we work tips. However, you can see 2015 we had about 17 cases, 2016 we had 28, and year to date this year we've had 44. So we still have 6 weeks to go, so I'm sure we'll add like 20 to that number. But it just keeps going. The reason that tips are so high is not because we're ignoring, 190 or so tips, minus the 44, is that in those tips we have included anything that we've touched or had to investigate this year. So that might mean offenses that were thought to be trafficking by a civilian perhaps, but are not. Offenses that did not happen in Fort Worth. Something that wasn't even an offense at all. I had someone call in that there were pizza boxes outside a house, and therefore there was someone trapped inside, and that was trafficking. And I just wrote down in my little notes sheet, I said, eating pizza is not an offense. We went on from there. So, but I included that, I wrote that down. So we will take everything, I will look into what we get. But there's a lot of misinformation about what trafficking is or isn't. The victims, the reason it's hard to know how many unconfirmed victims we have is that, from last year, is that the way the ads are written and are online, there's a lot of fake pictures used. There's a lot of we don't have faces on a lot of the victims, so some people we might think are victims, you just don't know. They might be the same person, they might be just a picture pulled off of Google, or they might be a new victim entirely. So that's why we don't know how many always victims there are in a given case. Okay, next slide. So this is just a visual of the tips and the cases that are going up. The tips is largely because of how much work people like you all, not my neighborhood, have been doing at getting the word out to the community. That we're getting so many more tips, which is phenomenal. Because even if it's not human trafficking, we want to look into it. And even if it's not human trafficking, it might be another offense. And even if it's not human trafficking, it might give us a clue to solve a case later. There's been several times that someone has given us a tip that we were not able to really work with at the time, but later on provided to be a very important link to another investigation, and often a human trafficking one. So don't be afraid to call in, even if you're not sure, if it really is trafficking. Go to the next slide. This is a graph of the Hollywood case that John worked on with Gigi's daughter. So this is just an example of how this can spider web out so quickly. This tiny, tiny part of this graph. There's much more written on the graph. This is actually in our office and the charts, and there are multiple more charts that have just spun off of this because we just couldn't put everything on there. But this is an example of how fast one person and one mom who is faithful to finding her daughter can break down. Next slide. So about Fort Worth, what are some hotspots in Fort Worth? One of them is right here. So Las Vegas Trail area, we get a fair amount of tips in this area. We've had tips over here in cases from prostitution or trafficking out of apartments, out of homes, strip clubs, and massage parlors, all in this area. So it's happening here, it's happening within 5 minutes of this church. Because a lot of tips I've gotten are right in this neighborhood. Another area that's a hot spot is down on the south side, 35 and Alta Mesa. You can see a lot of those hotels along the side of the road. We've got NIMN, we've got Super 8, we've got a few others. I'm sure you could probably rattle them all off. Yeah, I mean, those hotels down there. A little bit more north on 35, right next to the exit for Felix and that whole area, you've got Super 7, Relaxation, Days Inn. We've had trafficking out of all of those. So that's another little hot spot. North side, Meacham Boulevard, the Super 8 up there is really, really bad. East side, Hollywood area, Cavill, and all that area around there. Again, it's not that it's just human trafficking happening there, but that those are the places we're really, really seeing it again and again and again. I am not saying it doesn't happen anywhere else. We've had it in all sides of town. We have a massage parlor deep, deep north, almost to Keller, that was running juveniles, and we've had girls in hotels as far south as almost the border of Burleson. So anywhere by the airport. So our Fort Worth was all the way up to the airport, had trafficking out there. So it's absolutely everywhere. Next slide. These are some pictures of some places in Fort Worth that we've actually had trafficking or identified trafficking. Mexican bars on the north side is one. The Bar Juarez is one on the north side. The one just below it is the brothel on the north side. That was the original human trafficking case for Fort Worth with the Honduran girls. The very top picture is a massage parlor called Waterfalls in Central that runs juveniles that we think. The one below it is the Luxury Inn, which is in Central/East Side. Which needs to burn down. And then the last one there in the bottom is the Super 8 on Meacham and 35, where they reserved the entire 3rd floor for prostitution. Next slide. So how can you help? The task force is probably the best way to get involved. I'm not saying that just because I'm a part of it. So it really is though, because what the task force is basically most of the nonprofits within Tarrant County, as well as Fort Worth PD and Tarrant County Sheriff's Office, coming together and learning how to practically fight human trafficking in this county in month to month. So that way you can find other nonprofits within the task force that you want to get involved in, you can get involved. Some of the ones we work with the most are the NET, Rescue Her. The NET goes into Tarrant County Jail to speak with our women. Unbound provides a lot of support, especially in like money and plane tickets and coats and food and diapers. Traffic 911 provides advocates and mentors for our juvenile victims. And Valiant Hearts works with a lot of our adult victims of human trafficking, provides mentorship and counseling. Next slide. Again, here are some contact numbers. That number of human trafficking unit is my office number. If I don't answer, I'll call you back. So, and like I said, I'm not there often, but my cell phone or my email is great. The human trafficking hotline is a wonderful number to give out, as is the traffic 911 number. Those are often numbers that I give to my patrol officers and say that if someone doesn't want to outcry, but you think they need help, they're really good numbers to give them so that they can outcry later if they want to or they feel ready. So that is all I have, I think. Any time for questions?
Okay, At this time, we'd like to take any questions from the audience. We're going to have somebody on this side of the microphone and someone on this side. Please don't ask a question until you get a microphone because everybody wants to hear it. And we also may have someone who has the same question. And we want to be able to utilize as much time as we can for this. Please direct your question to one of the 3 or 4 that are sitting here. Sorry. And we do have a Spanish-speaking person here that can help with translation, should there be anyone who feels more comfortable in speaking Spanish. Actually,
it should be on.
I just wanted to know if the Fort Worth Police Department has set up any sort of a program for the schools regarding this subject and applying it to teenagers especially.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've done a few things with the schools. The first is I have taught all of our school resource officers. So I teach all of our officers, and they all go through a program that I teach. It used to be 8 hours, now it's 4. Hopefully it'll be 8 again soon. So I taught all of the school resource officers an 8-hour course on human trafficking, and Unbound and Valiant Hearts and Traffic 911 are now going into the schools and presenting programs along with the school resource officers to the youth, and they have specific youth-targeted programs. So that's very important for us.
And Alliance for Children also goes in and does presentations particularly pertaining to not only personal safety but also internet safety as well. So luckily I think we're really a really strong approach in our schools. I know, at least for my organization, we love going to schools. Sometimes it's tricky to carve out time for schools to get training. So if anybody has kids in schools, advocate at your school. Not only for the kids to get training, it's for the professionals who work at those schools to get training, and we need your help in that. So anytime that you guys can advocate, whether it's through PTA or PTO, or just I am an interested citizen, hey principal, have you ever had somebody come in to talk about internet safety with kids? We know it's important. Please let us know. And again, I know I could have talked for 800 years. I talk too much. But I will make sure that my contact information gets put up on the screen, because if you have any organization, church organization, anything like that that would like this information, we are happy to do that.
For any of you, are the majority of the victims female?
Yes.
The short answer is yes. The majority of the victims that we encounter are females, but don't be fooled. There are sections where the young men are out there as well. That's a little more closed off. You don't encounter it as much, and it's as hard as it is to talk to these young ladies about what's happening to them. You got to throw in a couple more elements when you're talking to a young man. It's even more difficult to get through that shell.
I think most often when we see, and I don't know if you guys have a different opinion in this, but most often when we see and we're talking about commercial exploitation, I try on occasion to stop using the word trafficking, because I think trafficking infers movement. And it's not that. It's not across state lines, it's not across city lines, it's not that. So I really try to drop that. I really try to go more towards the exploitation, because that's what it is. You're exploiting a child. I think when we're talking about commercial exploitation, I do believe that girls are much more a higher victimization population with that. I think what we see a lot of is online solicitation, and there's a lot of boys with online solicitation. It's just in a different, so it ends up being a different way. If that makes sense.
I know some of the hospitals have programs where they train the employees, especially in the emergency rooms in the children's hospitals, to recognize signs. Is there anything for healthcare providers in the community? I have 2 questions. And the other question is, I know a lot of times these, the incidence goes up when there's a big event, like football games, and is there training that's done in those areas, like the hotels around those areas and stuff, to help the people? recognized situation?
For medical providers, there is training available. We particularly, Cook Children's Hospital is a fantastic provider in the Tarrant County community, and they have wonderful training that they give to medical professionals, as does JPS and that networking system. For the events that come about, Hannah kind of talked about that. One of the other many reasons that Fort Worth and Tarrant County is a hotbed for it is not only just our interstate system and our bordering to a different country, it is because we've got, which is a great thing about DFW, is that we also have a lot of big events. So if it's Texas Motor Speedway, if it's the Cowboys, if it's the Rangers, if it's the Stars, if it's the Mavericks, I mean, it's all of those things. If it's the concerts that are coming in town, any big conventions that are coming in town, it's a lot of stuff. We're also a really easily accessed area. Again, great thing about, that's why I live in DFW. I love that we can get to so many places all at once. Unfortunately, that means a lot of other people can too. And so when they come in town, it's all about tapping into where they unfortunately can then get our kids. So there is training that we have that is associated with that. I think to plug a little bit more about Five Stones, something that Five Stones is really trying to push is that community awareness piece. And I think that's what's important. Some of the other organizations that Hannah referenced really goes into hotels, and they'll have campaigns that they'll put information into hotel rooms that if hopefully a child or a person who is a traffic victim can access it, then they know at least where they can get help. But I think that's something that we can, I think that's something that we could do more of, particularly in Tarrant County.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is there's a specific nonprofit, I don't know if they even have a name yet because they're just starting, that is going into hospitals and the clinics around here for specific one-day human trafficking training that fits with their continuing education hours. And it was a meeting that our department in Dallas and a couple other police departments had so that they have direct line of communication with us. So if you have any contacts with your hospital or your doctor's office and you want them to come speak and give their teaching and their continuing education, I can get you in touch with them.
I was curious to know what sex trafficking looks like for children in Fort Worth that are under the age of puberty, and what are warning signs that parents should look for. Any information that you guys would have in that department?
So most often when kids are sexually abused, actually the average age of when children are sexually abused is 9 years of age, 9 years old. What we know about kids who are sexually abused is that most often when they're sexually abused, there's a delay between when they're abused and when they actually make an outcry. It's a misconception to think that if I am a 9-year-old and being abused in my room by somebody who's in my household, that I immediately wake up and I go tell my parents. And that's the scary thing when we're talking about child abuse. Talking about child abuse and child sex trafficking, that's horrifying. It's at a whole other level when you're talking about it's happening in your home and it's happening in your family. I say that because most often in my experience, I can think of, and again, this is 17 years and talking to over 7,000 children, I can think of 3 kids actively in my brain that were under the age of 12. Most of them, the vast majority of them are 13 and over. I think the average age, I'd have around 14 to 15. So I think if there's anything that families can do with kids in their households, or if there's kids in your lives that you love, talk about what sexual abuse is. And you can do that in a very developmentally appropriate way. We talk constantly about how to keep kids safe. We talk about fire safety, that's a safe thing to talk about. We talk about safety on the internet, sometimes that's kind of safe to talk about. We talk about stranger danger, that's safe to talk about. We don't talk about what happens when you're talking about a private part of your body and how to keep a private part safe, even if it's somebody that you know. And that's what we need to do. We need to have these conversations with kids. We need to have them very transparently with kids, and I don't mean inappropriately, but I mean using the right words. We don't call this a flower. We don't call this a petunia or a na-na. We need to call body parts the right words, and that starts young. We teach kids parts of their body, and it goes from itty-bitty before they're talking. It's when you're changing diapers and when you're toilet training and when you're taking baths and you teach body parts to kids, yet suddenly when we're talking about vaginas and penises, that's a terrible word. FYI, they are vaginas and penises. That's the real word for them. So, I just said that in church, y'all. I say that, and I will not say that with shame, because that's what God made us with, and that's okay. Those are the names of those parts. We need to teach kids the right names to call their body parts, because when something is happening to their body parts, I want them to have the words to say what's happening to their body parts, and nobody to be confused. We have kids, unfortunately, that are taught cutesy names or names that don't make sense to anybody else except their family. But when I've got a child who comes up to their teacher and says, Daddy put his check in my pocketbook, and the teacher says, okay, go back to your seat, stop, we're doing a class assignment, that child's actually made an outcry because she doesn't know that a check is Dad's penis and a pocketbook is what she calls a vagina at home, and she's trying to say words that she was not taught. And kids aren't embarrassed by their bodies, FYI. Y'all know this, right? They're not embarrassed. They'd be like naked time all the time. I mean, it's just, that's what they do, particularly when they're little. We are the ones that are embarrassed with that. So, sorry. Again, very long answer. I'm so sorry. But what I think we need to do is we need to have the conversations young, because the younger we have the conversations and the more clearly we can talk about the parameters of safety in kids' bodies, I think we're equipping them better to protect themselves, and then helping them when they are reporting it to a trusted adult, that adult is not confused and they can immediately take action to be able to protect that child.
I'm wondering if there's a difference between the prostitution of an adult making the decision to do that because they're on drugs or they need to make means to support whatever they need, and someone that's being forced. Are we lumping all of that together?
Legally, yes, but what I would say to you is there any girl in here that when you were asked in first grade what you wanted to be when you grew up, did you say, I want to sell sex? The question was there a difference between women who are adults and engaging in prostitution by choice as opposed to women who are forced into doing it? Federally, under the age of 18, you are a juvenile, period. If you are under the age of 18, you cannot consent to engage in sex for money. Over the age of 18, it's still a violation, it's prostitution, but when you bring in the elements of force, fraud, and coercion, that's when it becomes trafficking. Okay? And force, fraud, and coercion is a very broad term. It could just be that I have a psychological control over you to where I'm telling you that this is the only way we are going to make money to feed ourselves this week. You have got to sell sex or we're going to starve. That's coercion. Okay? When it comes to kids, none of that comes into play. Now, do I encounter adult females that say that they want to be doing this? Yes. But I guarantee you, at some point in their life, they were introduced to an element that stripped them of the ability to say no. Okay? They were probably sexually abused at some point in their life, or under the age of 18 is when they were actually engaging and started and just continued on, and we hadn't found them yet.
My question is, for those victims that are held captive or enslaved by this human trafficking, if they do run back to their family, how likely are these perpetrators to go after the family?
I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. It does, but they're rare. Hollywood does us a big injustice in the way that they portray human trafficking and criminal activity in general. When you see all these shows where, you get the guy who gets locked up and he starts threatening a family and, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill your wife, I'm going to kill your kids. That stuff in the real world is rare. And usually when it does occur, it's just barking. Normally, the way you will encounter that type of stuff, they're not going to come at you and threaten you. They're going to come at you and say, look, we were friends. I mean, we were doing this, I had your back. Why'd you suddenly turn on me? Why don't you go and tell the police that you were lying, that you were making this up? That's much more effective because it draws less attention to them. Because if I scare you and I've locked this guy, or the police have locked you up, you're going to call the cops and tell them, well, now he's threatening. What the hell? I shouldn't have talked to you to begin with. So it's going to be a more subtle type approach. Now, it does happen to where they do threaten. I just put 2 people in federal custody last week over it. But that's very rare. That's very rare.
Hi, I don't know the right verbiage to say things to kids, and I work in apartments where I see inside their homes regularly, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, get my company involved in something that I don't know how to talk about. But we have a large clubhouse where I work, and we've had lots of other programs come in to help with learning English, social services, job placement, all these other things. We're really good at bringing things in. Is there a program that could do, maybe not sex ed for kids and moms and families, but to teach the kids about this? Because I don't know the right thing to say to a kid. And I believe if we could get the mothers and the kids in there with an open, informed, whatever, I think that would go farther than just what I can do. Could we is there a class that could come teach the kids at my property and help educate the moms and kids?
Yes, that is the good news. Yes, Alliance for Children has several different community education programs that we can talk about and see which one fits appropriately in both English and Spanish. So we can absolutely do that. I'll make sure you get my information.
I have a twofold question. Of those who are involved in human trafficking, what would be the number of those who have been smuggled from other countries and therefore put into this situation once they go through the corridor?
I'm gonna probably ping that to one of them because these are also several different. There are a couple different topics. Our focus really tonight is really talking about domestic minor sex trafficking, so commercial sexual exploitation of children. We also have labor trafficking, which can include children, but mostly includes adults. And there's also sex trafficking of adults as well. So there's several different populations, and it's all grouped under trafficking, which I think sometimes makes it a little confusing. But as it pertains, so is your question in regards to adults, is it about labor, is it about sex, or is it about both?
It's really more about once a child, let's say, for example, is identified and rescued, and let's say, for example, that there is not a family to go to because they were smuggled in. What do the authorities do with such people? Let's say, for example, that they may not have papers.
I'll say I've never, in 17 years, I've not encountered a case like that, so I'm going to defer to John. Again, the other part is, most often in my experience, these are kids here. I think so often people think that they have to travel other places and get the kids and bring them here. They don't have to do that. Your product is here. Your product is in our schools and in our churches and in our communities, so I don't have to go anywhere else to get them. It doesn't say, again, like John said, it's not like it doesn't happen, but more often, these are kids that live down the street.
You're actually asking a complicated question, and I'll explain why. When people are smuggled into the United States, okay, they are smuggled in, and do they end up in trafficking type situations? Yes. The vast majority of the kids and the women that we encounter are U.S. citizens who are from your neighborhoods. What you're discussing, when they do get smuggled in and then they are forced into sex trafficking, whether that be Latino families or from Africa or from Russia, or Greece or Asian countries that come in. Those are very closed off communities. So it's very difficult for us to penetrate that community to find out what is going on. If, for example, if you have a brothel that is running young Hispanic women, they're not going to cater to outside of that community. It just doesn't happen. I couldn't go up and knock on that door and get in. It just won't happen. So you're asking a question where A, it's difficult to penetrate, and B, even more difficult to get the numbers of it. As far as the kids that we do recover that don't have parents, we try to A, locate them with family that are already up here. If we don't have families, I know that ERO, which is Enforcement and Removals, that's the immigration side of ICE, they do have sponsor families who do take in young children where we have nobody to place them with.
I have a question. Hannah, you mentioned Meacham. We can't hear you. I broke the rule. I'm sorry. Hannah, you mentioned Meacham and waterfalls. That's in my community. Is there something active going on there now, or in the past?
So Meacham, the hotel up in Meacham in 35? Okay, and then waterfalls. Yeah, we've had multiple complaints on the waterfalls massage parlor. And the answer is there's a movement on now, probably still going on, since we've had a few complaints. The investigation is very difficult, and that's a long story. It's the Fort Worth PD and massage parlor investigations, but we are trying to break down that wall. And as far as the hotel, oh yeah, they are rocking and rolling. So we are hopefully, I think, John, are you still working on help stuff?
Yeah, that's a complicated one. It's that hotel there at Meacham and 35 has been a long time problem issue as far as activity with not just sex trafficking, but prostitution in general. I can't get into investigative details, but it's my plans to kind of make that maybe the new Fort Worth Police Headquarters, and not too far out from that. But we'll see what happens with it.
Okay, I got a question.
I have a question that goes with that same one for John, because I'm surprised someone hasn't asked this. So you heard them say it's still going on, so nobody said, well, why is it still going on? And I'd like for John and Hannah to talk about that. Why, when they know something's going on, why can't they stop it immediately?
The first reason is a lack of knowing about it specifics. I mean, we know that they use these hotels constantly, and there is a lack of cooperation from certain elements in the hotel that, you know, if I were working the front desk and I saw an older man walk in with a very young female who just looked out of place and the bells were going off, to me that would be something to report to the police. But if you're predisposed to just looking at it for the money aspect, you're just going to say, okay, pay your fee and then go do your thing. That's one of the reasons. The other reasons have to do with how transient this crime is. They don't stay in one place for very long. Like, they'll go to the Super 8 in Meacham and they'll place ads. They'll stay there a day or two. Then they'll go to the Motel 6, place ads, stay there a day or two, and then move on. And it's very difficult to locate. The other aspect of it is, I hate calling these guys smart, but in a lot of ways they are smart. Okay? The girl will be up in the room. You'll pull into the hotel. We'll try and arrange the deal. We'll get a cop and we'll dress him as crappy looking and non-police as we can. And we'll put him in and we'll try and get a date with this girl so that we can encounter her. Well, they're very smart. They know how to do it. They'll tell you to go to room 220 when they're really in room 225. They'll have the pimps out in the parking lot scouting, looking for you. Where are you coming from? Are you talking while you're walking in there? Are you looking for your backup officers that are in there? Are there other cops that are located around? Are there people just sitting in their car in the parking lot? And if he feels the slightest, I guess, if he thinks that there's any chance that the police are there, he's going to call the girl and just start, don't answer it, let it go. And you won't be able to get in. So it's very difficult, and they're smart about that aspect of it. Now, this is the part that I like, they're stupid in other aspects of it. This is about making money, and if you want to make money, what do you got to do? You got to advertise, right? You got to get out there on social media, you got to put my name out. You know, I'm Pooh, I'm out here making big money, I got fat cash, team money. I'm going to put pictures of all this stuff that I bought with all the money that this girl made. Look at how hard we're partying. It's recruiting elements, because then he's going to look for those girls who are the ones that he can get through the door. Self-esteem issues, the abuse, the girl that's on there all the time, man, I hate my parents, they just keep me on lockdown, I wish somebody would come take me away. He's going to latch on, they're going to start talking, she's going to see all this fancy stuff. Well, how are you getting that? Well, let me show you. And that's how it rolls. That part makes my job easy, because I send one search warrant and I have all the pictures, and then I set them in front of him when we're, talking, and he realizes, okay, I better plead and try and get the best deal that I can.
I just want to add one thing that John didn't mention that in our case was a blessing. They gather enough evidence, and it takes time to do it, because they want to go get these guys one time and put them away. In our case, time-wise, so my daughter came home in November of 2015. They didn't arrest it was July of 2016. It's over 6 months later. All that time they were gathering evidence. Then they go to the grand jury, present the case, and they get indictments, and they go get them. And my daughter did not have to testify in the general court, only with the grand jury and a private sector.
That's kind of the ultimate goal and why it takes so long, and we build that case, because I literally want to just drop a gigantic brick of cement on them. Because the last thing that I want to do is put that child back up on that stand in front of them and make them relive it. That to me is just despicable. But thankfully, in this community, those guys that we were talking about, 360 months, 30 years in prison, all of the really bad ones got more than 25 years in prison. And that was with cooperating and giving up everything they knew, from drugs to stolen cars to other pimps. The ones that go to trial, I will say that the judges here in the U.S. District Court, whether it be in Fort Worth and Dallas, if you put these kids through this and you make them relive it and we convict you, you're going to get life in prison. They've done it. The last 3 that have gone to trial have gotten life, and they will never get out. Because this is federal. We do not have parole. It's not, it's not 20 years you get to do 10. You got to do a minimum of 85%. So when it's 30 years, you do the math, you're going to do at least 85% of 30 years. And even then, you better have been a good boy.
Okay, I guess I'll have my question here. I'll stand up. I'm hearing that there's kids 12 to 13 years old that are going through all these horrible ordeals. Are these kids runaways, or are these kids telling moms and dads, I'm going to the mall? Because as parents, I'm old school. I was raised where if I wanted to go to X place and my dad said, you're not going, that was it. I wasn't going. And we have to, if we're going to be smarter than those guys, we're going to have to be a smarter parent too. We got to know what our kids are watching, where they're going. And even then, I don't care if they say you're invading my privacy. You don't got no privacy in my house. That's what my dad used to say. Son, When you start paying the bills and you got your own place, then you can tell me this is my privacy. We gotta get smarter, tougher. If we're gonna protect our kids, my kids are very young. I have 2 daughters. I married someone with 2 kids, and I adopted 2 kids. And all of them, thank God, they got their degrees, they're working fine. Now I'm getting my degree. So we gotta get tough with our kids. We gotta be there for them. And that's the only way we're gonna be able to not even give them a chance to get out there and be vulnerable.
I think you just answered the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We've got kids that are, some are runaways, and some are still living in their home. So it really depends on the circumstance. It really is about parental or caregiver involvement and having those conversations and just being aware. You have to be aware of what your kids are doing. When the things don't make sense, what they're telling you, you need to be aware of that. Again, start these conversations young. If you haven't had the safe sex ed, safe internet talk to your kids until they're 12, good luck. They've lacked you in their knowledge about all of that. Start young. Again, it's like fire safety. We don't wait until they're 22 to educate. We start when they're itty bitties. You don't play with matches. You don't touch hot things. And it's the same thing when we're talking about safety, about their bodies and about their bodies on the internet. We've got to be smarter about that.
Okay, so my question, this may just be paranoid mom, but I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. Our kids are roughly the same age. And I guess my question is how much my kids aren't being abused in my home, but we go to the park, we have these play dates, I guess I'm coming from like the fear factor, the social media stuff, I was in Target and this lady almost kidnapped my kid and all of these things, and when we have these things, we work together like, we're talking but we're walking the playground. Where are our kids? Do we have a head count? Da-da-da-da-da. Like, what else do we, is it just the normal, that kind of stuff? Like, I just don't want to miss anything. Like, I want to be prepared for, but I might be that whole Hollywood watching Blue Bloods and all that stuff, paranoia going on.
Well, and that's, I think what you're talking about and just being aware is really what the key is. Not saying that true kidnappings don't happen, but it's exceedingly rare. Most often when there's a kidnapping, it's somebody that child knows has a relationship with that child. It tends to be a custody issue. And again, in the trafficking world, it's still, I still have not had a case that it's an actual kidnapping case. They end up going somewhere and other things start happening. When we're talking about your little kids, just being aware, again, just being aware of what they're doing and being aware of who's around them. Again, most often for the little kids, that's actually not the sound strange. That is putting out way too much of a fuss for the abusers. If I'm a pimp, I'm not going to go kidnap a 7-year-old because that's going to put everything in the world on alert. I don't need to kidnap that kid because I can go somewhere and I can get 20 other kids that will make me lots and lots of money that nobody's looking for. Because those are the runaways that what unfortunately is termed in our world what are called throwaways. Those are the kids that they don't have good things happening in their home, they don't have people who care about them, who are having conversations with them, and so it's not noticed that they're gone or missing or skipping school or have suddenly been away from home. Has anybody seen Sally in the last month? No, I thought she was staying in her friend Jenny's house, whatever that is. Care about your kids. Have conversations about that. Surround them with a community of people who love them even beyond yourself. Because if something is happening to them, we always teach that if you can't tell mom, I'm like, Mom, whatever. She's like, 8 years old. But if you can't tell mom about something that's happening, if you can't tell mom about something that's happening, at least be able to tell this next person. It's all about surrounding your kids with trusted adults and always being aware of that. This is part of, again, my background and what I do is that we absolutely always believe that everyone we surround ourselves with are good people. But if I want to abuse a kid, that's exactly where I'm going. And I promise I can get access to any of your kids because that's what my goal is. So it's not only just being aware of the strangers, it's good that you're aware and looking around at the park, but it's not just them. Sorry, I don't want to make everybody super paranoid. I want you to be aware, however, when you have family gatherings, and when you have community barbecues, and it's people that you have relationships with for 5 years, 5 minutes, 50 years, because those are the people that are trying to gain access to our kids.
Yeah, the last thing, I don't want everybody to leave here afraid. What I want you to leave here is aware. I've seen, and I'll say this, I've started out in Baltimore, okay, and I went to Oklahoma and here. I've had 3 cases involving children under the age of 8 that were being trafficked. But what I will say is, it was done by their own parents. Okay, that's in the homes. The last thing that these traffickers want is attention, because they don't have to draw attention. They can operate completely in the shadows and out of sight. You'll never know their name, nothing, until it's already going on. You have to be, the key is you have to be aware of what's going on, and don't do it in a confrontational way. Don't tell your kid, no, you can't have Facebook. It's not going to happen. Because all your kid's going to do is go find another kid and use their phone to create the Facebook account. Make it a partner thing. Yeah, let's create your Facebook page. Hey, why don't you let me help you create it? Let's put some really cool, fun stuff on there. And then you have the access to it, and you monitor, and you explain to your child, this person you shouldn't be talking to, and this is why. Okay? This is not a friend that you know. This is not somebody that you interact with at school. This is not a family member. There's no reason for this person to be talking to you right now. And your child will be comfortable in talking to you about it. And it's not just Facebook. Facebook is actually the easy one for us, because Facebook stores all their stuff. I mean, I can ask for every ounce of records that Facebook has, and they send it to me. Sometimes they argue about it a little bit, but I get it. Snapchat and all these new ones that they're creating, where they take the picture, they send it to you, it's gone in like 3 minutes or 30 seconds or however long that app is designed. We can't get it. And a lot of these apps are maintained outside of the country, where if I get a search warrant from the U.S. District Court of Texas and I send it to them, they're just going to use it as toilet paper. They're going to, whatever. Doesn't mean anything to me. So what I would tell you is, instead of fighting the kids on social media, involve yourself with it. Make it a team effort. Hey, let's send Uncle Larry this cool picture of your achievement in school. Let's post that part on it. Let's not put our last name on there. Matter of fact, why do we have to use your name? Why can't we come up with a really cool name, like Super B, whatever? And that can be you on Facebook. Nobody needs to know your name out here. But if you want to friend school, people at your school, they know your name. Why do you have to put it online? That type of stuff.
I'm just going to reiterate some of the stuff that I'm listening to. I heard the state back here ask about NIMN. You guys pointed out that Tarrant County is like the highest in trafficking. You guys put a map up there that showed the hotspots in north side, south side, east side, west side. I'm on Fort Worth, NIMN. And some of the places that you guys pointed out and some of the hotels that you guys specified on, I'm pretty familiar with all of them. I live in Fort Worth, grew up here my whole life. And most of those places that you pointed out, they're like ghetto. It's right, so it's in the hood, it's ghetto, it's more urban areas. They look like rough places. So me seeing places like that is very obvious. I can be like, oh yeah, I can tell you probably those things are going on there. And I know you guys mentioned a brothel like on Riverside and stuff like that. Now, two-part question. Is there still a bunch of brothels around Fort Worth? This area? And like I stated, these places are kind of obvious, telltale signs. They look like rough places. Are there places that are not so obvious around us here in Fort Worth?
If you, that's wrong to say if you name a hotel, but yes, it happens in the not obvious places as well. Last kid that I talked to, she was sometimes having guys that would have to come to the hotel, but most often they were picking her up and they were going other places. It was in parks, it was in parking lots. She went to some guy's house who lived with his dad. So no, it's not always in the seating hotels. That's just some of the, again, the hot spots that Hannah was talking about. That is just the frequency of it, but it happens in a lot of other places.
Yeah, this isn't a crime that just hits poor neighborhoods or crappy areas. During the football game, they have a big college game here every year now to start the season off. Am I talking too much? Okay, that big gigantic football stadium that you guys have to suffer with the Cowboys and all of that, I get it. It has a big college game every year to kick off the season. Last year, we actually recovered a girl out of that Gaylord hotel. You want to talk about expensive? Not just the Gaylord price, but during the big college football game, that's one of the marquee matchups. Okay, it was sold out. You have these events like the Super Bowl. We've pulled kids out of the upper Marriotts, the Omnis, the W. These are not inexpensive hotels. What I'm talking about is the frequency of it. Like when there is no big event, they're going to try and get to an area A where they feel safe. Like if I know the hotel owner is going to keep me off of the books while I operate, you know, I'm going to use it. So that's what we're talking about. But don't think that this is confined to just, you know, low income. This can be any kid. Okay, this can be any kid. And again, I'm not trying to terrify you, but it doesn't have socioeconomic or racial boundaries. And the pimps don't either.
We have time, I'll let you speak, but we have time for one more question after this, so. And then I have some closing remarks.
And then I'm sure they will stick around for a minute afterwards and talk on one-on-one if you have more questions. I just wanted to add to that too, that part of the reason for those hotspots is, one thing I didn't mention is that as a unit for Orth PD, we're completely reactive right now, which means we have no proactive capacity. Not because we don't want to, but because we can't. With 2 people. now 4, so good in the month. But so we are getting reports from where officers are most commonly at, which is these ghetto type areas. I just got a tip today of a woman who was found through one of our nonprofits who was on a much higher end site, a paid site, and a lot of the high end, I won't say high end trafficking, but the harder to find stuff in the richer areas is places that we have to dig a lot harder to get to. And it's starting to come out, we're starting to find it, but as a purely reactive unit right now, we tend to see what the officers are seeing on domestics and traffic stops and stuff like that. And hopefully we will start getting to all the other areas because I know what's happening, I absolutely know it. And your question on brothels, yes, they still do exist. So we've had several cases on brothels in Fort Worth. So.
The panel has done an excellent job of painting kind of what a victim and a pimp looks like, and explaining that the majority of those victims are females and the pimps are males. Could you also speak briefly as to the involvement of adult women in the grooming and recruitment process as well?
There's a few aspects to that, and I'll probably let the other speak to that also. The adult women, like John said earlier, it's a difficult situation because a lot of our adult prostitutes, in fact, probably almost everyone I've talked to, started as a juvenile. Started as a trafficking victim or started under some sort of sexual abuse. So they have already had a long and difficult past. Some and many of our adult females are what we term as bottom girls. And so they have been in this sometimes for so long, sometimes not so long, that they are now sort of working with him, but more working with him as a way to survive. And they are victims, but they're not, they don't seem always like victims, but they are. And so the adult women that we've spoken to also seem to have a difficult time because they feel like they should have had more of a choice, and when they didn't,
They were still victims just like anyone else. I think the grooming process is very similar. You can make money, you can be who you want, you can be a model, we'll go to California, you'll be famous, you can be a hairdresser, we just have to get this, don't you love me? If you love me, you would do this for me. And really the only part I think that's taken out is you know, the family, you know, your parents are terrible or whatever. Now obviously they're already on their own, so that element is taken away. The tough thing about adults is you can't list them as runaways either. So nobody knows they're gone, nobody cares. There's no one who's looking for them. And so it's hard to sometimes know that they're gone.
And while Hannah's talking about the bottom, that is an aspect certainly that happens in trafficking, but there's female pimps, absolutely. The kid that I just talked about who was picking up her car and stuff like that, totally female pimp. Nobody's making her do it. But there are more men than women.
I know we're running late, I'll be super quick, but if there's only 5 people, what can we do? Can we call our congressmen, our people, our voters? You know, there's a lot of people who care. Can we help to get you a better budget?
Okay, in closing, and that was the best last question, well, that was going to be the last one. But in closing, we have some brochures. I'll pass some out to a few over here. If you don't want them, leave them on the table out there, because I just found out we didn't print enough for everybody here. It's a resource list. It gives you all the numbers on the front and back of who to contact and what they do and what they can help you with. If you have a phone, maybe take a picture of one if you can. We have on the pamphlet that you got in on the agenda, we have our Gmail address. If you don't get one, write into us at the Gmail account and we'll get back to you. But the point she's making, the point I want to make, or our group wants to make, there's a lot of places out there. The 5 Stone Task Force is, as you've heard several times tonight, is the organization that brings all these people together. They have everybody in the room. They have everybody there at the last Tuesday of every month at 11 o'clock. Now again, I do hear that it's going to move, but right now it's on Nashville Street at 11 o'clock on Tuesday. I go every month, our organization goes every month, so we can learn about where we can step in and what we can do. It's good for us to get out here and talk about it, hear it. We want to help you. We are not resource available, but we can roll up our sleeves and get to work, and I would suggest you do the same thing. There's a lot of laws that's changed in this last year because people have either written petitions, signed things, gone online and done petitions. So go online and Google this, because you'll find the 5 Stone Task Force. You'll find what laws have been changed and what people as citizens, whether you have kids or in your community, what you can do to help. And volunteer your time, your effort, your money. There's places out there for you. Going into schools, I'm working on some school projects right now to try to get us into schools, but it's a very different, sensitive subject to the schools. It has to be presented a little bit different.
And if I can plug one more thing, have conversations. I'm not trying to boil this down because I know it will sound tacky and everything like that, but it is about money. I don't know of a unit with, specifically, this is just one jurisdiction that we work with out of the 34 in Tarrant County, but there is not one unit, investigative unit, that couldn't use more manpower. My unit that I work with on a daily basis, with the Crimes Against Children unit, there's supposed to be at least 22 detectives, we've got 13. They're trying their best. So what I would really encourage you to do, have conversations about it. Because the more that we can talk about it, the more that we can advocate it. And if the city, whatever department you live in, if the city can get more bodies, then we can do that. But we have to have the conversations and have people who have knowledge about this being a true issue before anything else.
City Council is aware of it and they are working on a lot of things, but encourage your council representative that you need help or you want more help.
To me, I want to say one thing. It's the most important person that you can leave here with and have and call and have a conversation with is your neighbor. Okay? Because the more people, we have got to get past not being able to talk about this ugly topic. Okay? It's got to be brought out into the light before it's going to get the attention that it deserves. And the more people who talk about it and ask questions about it, that's how the squeaky wheel gets the grease, you know what I mean? It's going to get more attention of the people who do control the money. if more people are saying, why is this going on? Why is it when I go online, I'm seeing all these ads with all these kids and women selling sex all over the place? We got to deal with this. Let's get past it.
I used to work in Carver County at the Children's Advocacy Center, and we couldn't get money to keep the Advocacy Center open. I worked hundreds and hundreds of cases when I worked for CPS. I did all the sexual abuse, and it did shut down because we could not get the money to keep the center open. So coming from the side that I worked for CPS at that time, and if you don't have any support, it'll get shut down. Those groups are vitally important to have the care team, the police department, the DA's office, all of those people work in one case for each kid. That is so important. And when those teams cannot get together, you get you get a fourth of what you should get for each case. So,
The good news is they're reopening the Clark County.
good, yeah.
Okay, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, and we've had a great turnout, a great night, but we told the pastor we'd be out at 8:30, and my watch said it's 8:35. So, if you want the brochures and watch for the next meeting, look at our account. We'll be sending information out, and you'll be getting your certificate if you signed up for that. Thank you.